everybody, and welcome to another edition of The Customer and the Service. I'm Sean Petrasky, and with me, as always, is my co-host, John Lemazny. Hello, John. How are you?
Hey, Sean. How you doing?
Doing pretty good. I understand that you have had some customer experiences this week. It sounds like some bad experiences, maybe, in the museum industry. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I think that we give a lot of positive feedback to computer-mediated purchases.
Right? We do. I think we do. We are definitely proponents of that technology.
We like EasyPass, right?
Yeah.
We're pro EasyPass. And we like Wawa. We like the Wawa kiosk.
Exactly.
But there are times when people try to implement the Wawa kiosk and it doesn't work so well, like we've talked about cranberries at Ryder, which they may have improved. I haven't been there in a while. Have you been there recently?
No. I never even used the system we talked about.
Yeah, I used it. It was not Wawa. And it could have been so much. Anyway, this is just to say that we've talked many times about the range of what's possible with these computer-mediated purchases, right? The idea is you walk up to this interface, you don't have to interact with a human, the service gets their money, you get what you want as quickly as possible, and it can be a very positive experience. There's more clarity, less confusion, and as a result, it can be great. So anyway, I went to Philadelphia Museum of Art over the weekend, and had a friend with me. And I happen to be a member at the museum, and so I have a card that gets me in for free anytime. I could go tomorrow and go in and enjoy all the sights there. And it's a fantastic museum. We had a really good time. But it is only a membership for me. It's not a dual membership. It's not something where I can bring in somebody for free whenever I want. And so at least it saves me $20. It's $20 admission. They used to have a program where every Sunday, every Sunday you could get into the museum for free, or you could pay a suggested amount. But in this particular case, they no longer do that. They now have one Sunday where they have that a month, where you can pay what you like. You could get in for $1, but they really expect 20. And the rest of the Sundays and the rest of the days, it costs $20 per adult to get in. It costs a little bit less for kids, whatever. So I said, okay, and you walk in and there's a line over, because it's Sunday and people still go on Sunday. There's a line over at the registration for that, and I walk up to, there's a circle in the main entrance where there's like information, and I walked up to the circle and I said, is there any way that I could pay for my ticket here? Because there was a person who was free, and the rest of the people who were at the circle were helping people, and I figured, oh, well, maybe this person can help me, and nobody else has run up to her yet. And she says, sure, I can help you. Let's go over to the kiosk. And I said, oh, you can't help me here? I'll just go to the line. She's like, no, we'll just do it at the kiosk. It'll be fine. So she walks me over to the kiosk, and she says, scan your membership card, and it'll walk you through. And I thought, Wawa does this really well. PMA makes a lot more money than Wawa. I'm sure that they will have an equally good system. 15 minutes later, and after the woman came over and visited me twice to help me through the process, and I'm not an unintelligent man, Sean. I'm familiar with computer systems. I'm familiar with computer kiosks. I talk about them on a podcast weekly. You could say that I'm an aficionado. of computer mediated entry.
Dare I say an expert?
Maybe a connoisseur for sure. I licked it. It didn't taste very good. So, yeah, so I expected it to go well. It did not go well. And the reason it did not go well was because it was not clear. When you go to Wawa, there's a beautiful interface that gives you pictures to reinforce what you're clicking on. It gives you very clear delineations between one item and another. It gives you a very limited set of options. In this particular case, there was a lot of language that was being used that was sort of dancing around the idea that they are asking some people for money and asking other people not to pay. So there's lots of different ways they could have done it, but generally speaking, they should have just made it clear. So one of the options was member with guests, $0. And I was like, that sounds perfect, that. And meanwhile, the woman who had to leave her desk is looking over my shoulder, making sure that I'm doing what I agreed to do, which is not the point of the kiosk. The kiosk is that it's unmanned. And I already had the tags that get you into the museum in my hand because she handed them to me over at the desk. I was just going through this just so they could get their $20. And it just seemed ridiculous that this machine that was supposed to be mediating on her behalf ended up making her and I do twice the work than if she had just done it where she was. This is another thing, and I think we talked about Target once, where I asked somebody who was behind a computer at Target, can you tell me if you have this item in your store? In my mind, I'm saying you're at a computer. You obviously have the ability to do everything that anybody can do at a computer. You could tell me if you went to the Target website whether or not you had this item in stock. So obviously you're going to have an advanced system because you're in the store in front of a computer that you use maybe 4, maybe 6, maybe 8 hours a day. You'll be able to tell me. You'll be able to do many other things, but you'll be able to tell me whether or not you have this item here. That is the bias that I bring with me. Because in my work, I can do everything I need to do basically in a browser. Most everything. Databases, research, writing, you name it. I can probably do it in Chrome. You can't tell me whether or not the store that I am standing in, that you are using a computer in that's connected to the enterprise's inventory system, I am positive, whether or not there's an item still in the store for me to buy. So I don't have to walk to the other side of the store to go find out that it's not there, which is what ended up happening. The same is true for Philadelphia Museum. The woman at the desk who walked me over to the kiosk had a computer screen in front of her. Why could she not have done the transaction that I needed her to do as a backup for the long line that was going on the other side of the room? I could tell why there was nobody at the kiosk. I could tell why there was a line over at the people at the human interface and no line whatsoever at the kiosk. That's a fail. They should really pay attention to that, because that is not. I did not feel like my membership was being rewarded. I did not feel like the job that needed to be done by that computer interface was doing what it needed to do. You have anything to add to the story?
Yeah, I do. And I'm thinking about industries that have self-service kiosks, and there's two examples that come to mind. Grocery store self-service and gas stations. We live in New Jersey and we forget what everybody else in the world does. But thinking about the difficulties you had at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, I think back to what happens at self-service for checkout. If I am at a grocery store, I've seen this happen. I've seen it happen a million times. you go to a typical self-service section of a grocery store. You'll notice that there's 6, 4, maybe 8 self-service stations, right? And there's one actual register with an employee behind it, and they're able to monitor what's going on at the self-service checkouts from their kiosks. And I've seen this happen where a customer will go through their order, something will, they'll get to the end of the order or they'll be near the end of the order, and they don't want to hold up the line or something special needs to happen, and you'll see this happen where the employee will come over, they'll try to solve the problem right there on the spot to keep everybody going on that particular location. But then I've seen this happen. They do like an override, and everything that's going on at the self-service gets transferred to the employee's kiosk, and then they're able to finish the transaction from the kiosk or whatever. And this happened to me. We were in Stop and Shop in Pennington about 2 weekends ago, and we had a woman. Literally, it was a full order of groceries. She had been scanning and scanning and scanning and scanning. She realized she left her wallet in her car. So when we're talking like we were sitting there for like 15 minutes, 20 minutes while this woman finished her check, did her scanning, and then we had to wait for her to run to her car. And then finally she came back and she's like, I can't find my wallet. We've been sitting there for like a half an hour, and the employee was like, hold on. And she did her, pulled it right out of that self-service kiosk, put it where she was at the employee terminal, and, she did something where it then, like, completed the transaction so that we could then check out, but this woman still had to pay at the employee terminal. And that's, exactly what Philadelphia Museum needs to have. Think about gas stations. Gas stations have been doing this for 100 years, right? You go to the pump, you swipe your card, and you pump your gas, right? Sometimes that doesn't work. What can you do? You can go inside to the convenience store or whatever is there, after hours, and the person behind the register has a similar station where they can monitor what is going on at the pumps, and they can complete the self-service states. You want to pay by cash? You got to go inside. You pay by credit card, you can do it without having to go inside, but you got a problem, you got to go inside, and they can take care of it. So this is exactly what, organizations need to think about. If you're going to put in a computer-assisted system, you need to be able to have the ability to step in, swoop in, whatever you want to call it, and take a snapshot of what's going on in the customer kiosk and pull it out to a full-service kiosk that only an employee can use. That way it keeps the line flowing, keeps the concept of self-service flowing, and allows you to provide one-on-one interaction and service with someone who obviously needs additional service because there's a problem or whatever.
And it could be pushed further too. There's no reason why Philadelphia Museum couldn't have an app that allows me to open up the app, open up a unique we could use NFC if NFC was universal, but use a QR code that was unique to me, that proved that I was a member, that was set only for the beginning to the end of my time as a member, and would no longer work the day before or the day after. That I would be able to go up as I'm walking through, hold open my phone, scan it, it pops out a pin for me to flip on, and I'm done. Like, come on. Crystal works in one of the newer office buildings in Philadelphia. It's called Commerce 1 and Commerce 2. And that's how their guest system works. It's actually pretty fascinating. So if I need to go visit Crystal at work, I go to the security desk, right? They actually hand me a QR coded sticker. And when I go to, to get to the banks of elevators, I don't want to call them subway turnstiles, but it's like these fiberglass gates that are like crossed almost like this, and then you scan the QR code, and then they open up and they let you in. Right.
So taking your idea, the Philadelphia Museum of Art could institute those gates, right?
Yeah.
You do your payment on your phone, You hold your phone up to the scanner at the gate. Boom, you're in. Right? Done. You don't even have to have a PIN. You can just hold that phone, scan it. You got 2 people. You give the phone back to the other person in your party. Have them scan the second QR code. Done. Very simple solution. Very simple.
Yeah, and I mean, they probably would balk at that because there's a certain element of elegance that they're trying to convey. They're trying to have it be open, and they're trying to have it have a certain look to it that a turnstile would probably work against. But that could be resolved somehow. I mean, that's the job of a designer, a space designer. But there was another thing that happened at the museum. We went to the Asian art section, in which there's this beautiful Japanese house, a tea house, that's fully recreated in the PMA. And I've only ever seen one guard there, and I've been there probably 10 times. Beautiful space. The light is really particularly daylight lamps, and the walls are all bright blue, as though it's a bright blue sky. And it's like a cloudy, overcast day when you walk into this room. And it's an illusion, but it really is a believable illusion. Anyway, everybody goes in that place because it's such a beautiful little space to sit and walk and look at the woodwork and think about what it would be like to live in this little tiny space. It really is inspiring for people who are interested in the tiny house movement. At any rate, there's stones, and it's recreated. It's not like a typical museum space. It's a recreation as though that's a plot of land that somebody would be living on. And there's a path that goes through it, and that's where people walk. And there's like velvet ropes that are made of whatever, twine. And this one guard, who's there all the time, revels in telling people what they can and can't do, mostly what they can't. And so, unlike most other spaces in the museum, where you might get a gentle reminder, "Oh, sir, you're standing a little bit too close to that painting. Could you please step back?" Or, and there is a little bit of an edge to that because they do it all day. But this guy, in the Asian tea house section, the Japanese tea house section, I mean, he kind of shouts, "Sir, you can't be on those stones. You have to step off those stones, sir." After you've stepped off the stones, I know better than to do any of his, don'ts. I stopped doing that years ago. But he gets into it, and he's got the voice, and it's almost like he's militant about it. And I guess he's there for that reason, because it's a precious space. But you don't need to be a jerk about it. That's not good customer service either. I'm there to enjoy myself, and all I can hear is you talking about, what this person can't do. And I'm in this beautiful, peaceful space. Respect it. Let me respect it. And, gently remind me that I can't stand on that stone. Anyway. I have one other thing to talk about, and then I understand you have something to talk about. So, have we talked about the make movement?
We've mentioned it a couple times, but we haven't really described what it is. I have a lot of questions about make.
Good.
So let's talk about it.
So the make movement is it's essentially a brand. It's an idea that is related to O'Reilly, who makes the animal technology books, O'Reilly publisher.
Yes.
And the idea of make is to re-empower people, Americans mostly right now, but it's becoming more international, to re-empower people to learn how things work and how things come together. And it's essentially a hacker philosophy. It says, if you can't open it, you don't own it. And there's a whole bunch of these sort of key ideas to makers. But it really comes down to that. If you can't take it apart and figure out how it works, it doesn't really belong to you, and it should. And the idea is, too, that you should learn how to use tools, and you should be familiar with them, and you should know what one tool does versus another, and not to use a drill as a hammer, and not to, but also to know how to solder, and to know how to program, and to know about Arduino, and to know about the Raspberry Pi, and to know about programming. Because as time goes on, the people who have those skills will be empowered, and the people who don't will be reliant. And nobody wants to be reliant. Everybody wants to be empowered. And the difference is that some people are taught and led and come to an understanding about how things work, and others are taught and led to simply purchase what somebody else has done. It's also sort of against the idea of a disposable society. It's really into remaking, reusing the post-industrial complex and the problems of the post-industrial complex. The idea of bringing something home and making it local, and making something that you can be proud of, even if the act of making is the thing that you're proud of. That's make. You have any questions so far?
No, I have a little bit of knowledge. I read an article many years ago on Wired, and it was around the time when Arduino was kind of getting sort of mainstream publicity. And I read a whole article, and it was about the Italians that founded the Arduino movement and the philosophy behind the open hardware initiative. And that was an article that kind of changed my life, actually. Unfortunately, I have not kept up with what's going on in open hardware and Arduino. I mean, I know it exists. I hear little things here and there. But, that article and hearing the words of its founders was a radical awakening for me. And I just shared that article with so many people and said, do you know this is going on right now? Like, this is huge. We need to be paying attention to this. And, that was probably about 3 years ago, maybe even 4. And so I'm on board with what you've said so far.
So Arduino, excuse me, Arduino is one of the focuses of making, because it essentially gives you a platform that is much different than a computer. Although the Raspberry Pi, which is a $35 computer, gives you the platform as a computer and allows you to build ideas off that. But there are different levels of understanding, and very often they center on electronics, but not always. Sometimes it's about sewing. Sometimes it's about industrial design. Sometimes it's about graphic design. Sometimes it's about painting. Sometimes it's about interactivity. But often it has this electronic component, and because Arduino takes care of so much of the hard work of the platform itself, you can build it yourself, and in fact the open source hardware aspect of it publishes the knowledge of how to build it yourself. And usually after somebody becomes familiar with Arduino and does some of the projects, a more advanced project is to make their own Arduino based on the plans. And an example of something you can do with Arduino is you can hook it up to the internet and say, pay attention to this RSS feed, and anytime the word Sean shows up, light up this blue LED for 2 seconds, and then turn it off. So you could, there are more practical things you could do. You could set up a Twitter feed that automatically tweets whenever you open up your refrigerator door. And it would be like, you could call the feed, he's eating again, or something. So,
well, the article that I read was even more practical, in the sense that it was about people creating portable media players based upon Arduino.
Yeah, there are many things you can do. And Raspberry Pi makes easy use of that. Like, because it just runs Linux, you can set up Linux on a Raspberry Pi, full-blown computer that fits into an Altoids tin, put in a USB-based hard drive that Linux talks to, and the media is stored on the hard drive. Linux provides the functionality, and you can set it up and forget it, and then whenever you walk into your house, just connect to it, listen to your music or whatever, and it makes something that would have been very involved a few years ago incredibly simple and straightforward and inexpensive, because you don't have to spend $100 or $200 or $300 on an old computer. You can get a new Raspberry Pi for $35. So it's just a really interesting time, and a terabyte drive for $70.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, Make is an idea, it's a movement, and it's a brand. And there are a couple surrounding products of the brand. There's Make Magazine, Craft Magazine, Maker Fair, which happens in San Francisco, New York, and some other places around the country, where people come together, makers come together and show what they have done with the ideas in Make. And then there's the philosophy that we already talked about. Finally, there are makerspaces. Makerspaces are agreements amongst people, makers, to come together with some frequency and work on projects together. Sometimes it's classes, sometimes it's events, sometimes it's just a meetup, A few years ago, I was contacted out of the blue by somebody who was starting a Make Princeton. And I was really excited about it, but my schedule didn't meet up with their schedule, and so I didn't ever make it to one of the meetings. But I was really excited about it at the time, not as excited as I am now. And it has never reemerged. I recently approached an arts organization in Trenton that's gaining popularity that I think that we've talked about before. And we've already had discussions, myself, a teacher in electronics, and the director of the program there came together, agreed that we would be able to use the space, had some talks about money and reimbursement and space and insurance and some other things. And it looks like sometime this year, probably in June or so, we'll probably advertise it Art All Night. We will start to take students for classes in a makerspace. And I'm announcing the title, proposed title for the makerspace now. We're going to call it Trenton Makes. Cool?
Very exciting.
Yeah, I'm very excited about it. So
now I have a question.
Yeah.
I've always had a kind of an understanding that 3D printing was kind of like a major part of the Make movement. Is that true?
It is, and the reason for that is because 3D printing takes the paradigm of creation associated with computers, which currently is either digital, non-physical form, or the physical form of a piece of paper, and turns it into the ability to create an object. So, for example, one controversial thing that often the uninitiated and superficially initiated read the headlines that say MakerBot used to make a gun, or kids use Makerspace at high school to make plastic knives or whatever, some nonsense. But there's so much more than that. There is the ability to create an object in 3 dimensions digitally or physically, and then translate that to a 3-dimensional digital model and then print that item. So literally anything that you could imagine you could print if you had enough electricity, plastic, and time. So we have one three-dimensional digital artist who uses MakerBot or some other 3D printer in order to make digital designs now and digital physical objects now. And so, yeah, he will definitely be involved. He'll be one of the people who we approach as a specialist. Whereas the main teacher that I went to talk to this director with, he's an electronics teacher, and so he really knows electronics and electric, and will be able to teach those ideas and know how to use those tools. So that's really what it requires, is an agreement amongst people to come together, an agreement with the philosophy, and skills and expertise that people are willing to share essentially for free. This will probably follow this organization's standard rates for classes, which are not free, but there are some costs to be reimbursed. So we're still working those things out, but guaranteed it will be affordable for most anybody.
Well, that's really awesome. I mean, I keep hearing about, I'm glad to hear that there's a community-driven organization that is educating people on this, because I keep hearing about more and more how even international companies now are supporting this movement. Like, for example, Nokia, as we all know, is the world's largest manufacturer of Windows phones. They actually just recently released, if you have a certain model of Windows phone, I believe it's the Nokia Lumia 820, which is available on the AT&T and other international networks. You can go to the Nokia website, and they have a 3D file that you can run through your 3D printer. It'll print out a phone case for you. Free of charge, they offer this. So you don't even have to go, a lot of people like to have cases for their phones. You don't have to go to the store. You don't have to spend, they always overcharge you for stupid things like a phone case. Nokia is offering up free. They're like, hey, if you have a 3D printer, you're into this stuff, here is the exact file that we use to create this case for the phone, and if you want it and you want to do it yourself, have at it. And I think that's amazing, because things like that are like, they're trivial. I mean, we don't know that. You go to a store, Verizon store, AT&T store, you see a phone case, they want $30, $40 for it, piece of rubber, a piece of plastic. Typically, you go to eBay or Amazon, you get those things for what they really cost. You know what I mean? $1.50 or $2, $3, whatever. But that price gouging is just something that always irritates me for something so simple that could be manufactured. But 3D printing now gives people the power to do it themselves, and your organization is showing people who maybe aren't aware of it or fully aware of the capabilities of the make movement, that they can take these things in their own hands, save money, and make what they need as they need it. And that's a huge, empowering belief. And I think it's something that really goes along with what we talk about, what we preach every week, and it goes along with a lot of other movements we've talked about too.
And you think about how printing, two-dimensional printing, has changed in the last 10 years. You can go to Staples right now and get a black and white laser printer that is of the highest quality you could have gotten 10 years ago for free, basically.
Right.
$200, or it would be a lot of money to spend on a basic black and white double-sided printer today. Three-dimensional printing, on the other hand, is still in its infancy. It's a very specialized niche thing, and so it's not as easy as just hitting print. You have to have 3 dimensions to the object. You have to understand what the Z depth is. You have to understand how to use an application that understands 3-dimensional printing. And by the way, you know, you think about clip art, right? You can print out a piece of clip art. You can go to some photo site and, you know, go to Flickr and print out a beautiful photo with a high quality color printer, laser printer hopefully, and have something to put up on your wall. And that would have been novel 15 years ago to get a high quality print. You would have had to have gone somewhere to go and get that. And now it's just, you know, it's expected that you would have a beautiful print.
Yeah, it's trivial.
Yeah, it's trivial. In the same way that there are collections of clip art and photos and pre-existing two-dimensional objects that you can print, there are also already pre-existing collections of free and pay-for models that you can print. So if you go to SketchUp, for example, which is a Google product, and you go to import, like file import, you can go and check out the, they call it the 3D warehouse.
Yeah, right. That's what it's called.
I'm sorry?
That's what it's called, the warehouse.
Yeah. And while you can use those right now for free in SketchUp, the idea of printing is still a two-dimensional idea for most people. But if you have a three-dimensional printer, you could theoretically use something like SketchUp to in just a few minutes, you know, go and grab a model of your favorite building that makes you think of your childhood or whatever. Or you could go make your own building. You could make your childhood home in SketchUp and print it out and keep it on your shelf. And it would be a different experience than a two-dimensional image of that same house. You know, in the same way that we cherish photos of things from different different times in our life. Think about how three-dimensional objects will have that effect too. You know, or if there's some object that you lost, but you'd be able to recreate it in 3 dimensions on SketchUp or 3D Studio Max or one of these other applications, Blender. There's nothing keeping you from having it again. It may not be the original, but we have all adapted to the idea of having a facsimile of something and having value attached to that facsimile. So anyway, the idea is that we're going to have a space where we'll be able to pull people together. We'll have events, we'll have classes, we'll have informational sessions, and maybe even we'll have a Trenton Maker Fair at some point in the next year or so. I would be really excited about that.
That would be awesome.
The reason that this fits in with customer service, of course, is because it's a need, I think, especially in the Trenton community where it is post-industrial, and there are a lot of people who need skills, and there are a lot of people who need the benefit of knowledge and intelligence in various areas. And this organization is really interested in helping those people to do that, and this is a very specific way that people would be able to come away with new skills that they would be able to take to a job interview and get a job immediately, because they are not highly common skills.
You know, your analogy of post-industrial and Trenton, it got something going in my mind where, you know, if you think back about 20, 30 years ago, machine shop, right?
Yeah.
Machinists, tool and die people, highly skilled laborers, right? Are there even tool and die shops around anymore? Good luck finding one, right? That whole industry is gone, and the few that remain are highly specialized. You know, they probably don't even have crews. You know, it's probably just a small operation, 1 or 2 guys, and you know, that's a product that job or that skill is a product of the industrial era that existed in, you know, in our country's like manufacturing golden age. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And that's gone. Now I look at this as the next, like, as what's the word I'm looking for? The 2.0 of Machine Shop 2.0, 3D printing, Arduino, Maker, it all comes together. And like you said, you go into a community like Trenton where, jobs are, non-existent. I mean, what industry exists in Trenton now? Like none, other than government.
Right.
And that's an opportunity for people to get cheap space. You know what I'm saying? Like, if we wanted to go in business making something, we could get cheap space in Trenton. And, with all these tools, these open source tools, we could start like a production line. Making phone cases or make whatever it is, whatever our product is. I mean, that's huge. Like, that's bringing industry, manufacturing back to America and empowering communities that were, look at the Midwest, the industrial, the auto industry, like Flint, Michigan, or Detroit. All these areas, these, as they called them, the car towns. Ewing was an car town for a long period of time. There's a federal program that is working, spending millions of dollars every year trying to repurpose these car towns. Ewing is one of them, believe it or not.
I believe it.
And it's helping these towns recover from the closure of the auto industry. And you think about this and what's going on. Again, we're in the infancy of it, but this is where the government or communities should be looking at as a way to repurpose. There's so much industrial skill that's being put to waste. I mean, think about it. You could go into Ewing. I guarantee you there's a retired guy in Ewing, 65 years old, 70 years old, whatever, who has so much knowledge about manufacturing, what it's like to run a plant, a line, whatever. If you hooked him up with a bunch of 20-somethings, 30-somethings that wanted to use this make technology, you could leverage that manufacturing experience. There's a veteran, a man who probably did his job 40 years, 50 years. And you put that together, that's a recipe for success.
I agree.
And that's huge. I mean, this is, like I said, this is all just kind of coming to me right now, and as I'm saying it, it's like just as I'm thinking it, and I just, man, I hope it's successful, but at the same time too, like, I feel like more awareness, like people need to be connecting those dots more. You know what I mean? And I don't feel like that's going on. And like I said, I read about the make movement, and I'm not seeing those dots being connected in what I'm reading. Have you seen stuff like that happen?
I believe that it's starting to, and part of the reason why it makes so much sense for it to connect in Trenton is because this organization has had a groundswell of support and popular agreement about what they are doing, and it has become a recognized name of quality in the area. The other thing about Make is that it's a very creative-based process. Let me just talk about creativity for a second, right? My father was scared to death that I was going to get this fine arts degree. My undergrad is in fine arts sculpture. Right. And he was scared to death I was going to get this degree because he thought, what are you going to do with that? How is that? Are you going to be a starving artist? Like, he was really concerned. And what I found out, and what we all find out, is that it really doesn't matter what your degree is in. It matters what you came away with. And what I learned about was creative problem solving. Creative problem solving has to be one of the most cherished skills that is not taught very often, especially in certain expertise areas. The more mathematical or the more scientific and the less like humanities they are, the less creative the student is supposed to be, the more iterative or research-oriented, not experimentation-oriented they are supposed to be. And so to come out of a fine arts degree, the thing that you come away with is encountering a problem that you've never seen before, not freaking out, looking at the tools you have around you in order to solve the problem, and being able to reasonably solve the problem. That's an incredibly useful skill, and we did it every week for years. Anybody who has a fine arts degree did this for years. And that's what I didn't know how to explain to my father, was that, you know, it's going to be okay because my passion in technology is where I'm going to get my job. My ability to apply the knowledge of problem solving to the thing that I love is how I'm going to get a job. Don't worry about the job. Meanwhile, you know, I have creativity. That's in part what make imparts. It's the idea of constructive problem solving, the ability to look at an object and say, I wonder what that looks like inside. The ability to understand how slot A fits into tab B and why there is a reaction when that happens. And to find out what that reaction is without being told, because very often we're not told. We're expected to just take an object and use it exactly the way that it was intended and never use it in any other way. This is my problem, of course, with the Apple philosophy, is that it becomes harder and harder as time moves on to open up an iPod or an iPhone and do anything with it, because it becomes such a highly specialized piece of equipment with no replaceable parts. And that's why I love open source, for the same reasons, is because not only do you get a working product, but you get the ability to make changes to that working product to meet your own needs. This is, in fact, the key reason why this is important for me, and I think important for many other people. And I think that it's a more reasonable way to explain why open source is important. Because often when I talk to audiences about my passion about open source, and I say, it's important because there are other people who are making changes to the code, and if you wanted to, you could make changes to the code too. And they say, oh, I could never do that, because we've all been taught that we could never do that. But if you believe that you can, and you have people who are showing you how to, of course you can. And why shouldn't you? That's what Make is about. So I'm really excited about the prospect of that. And we are going to focus, I think, mostly on children and young adults. Although we're not going to close out anybody. I think our starting age is going to be about 8. The same kids who love Legos, the same kids who are engineers of a certain kind with things like Legos, and kids who are interested in robotics but don't know where to get started with it. That's where this teacher's expertise lies. So I think it's going to be a fantastic ride. I think that we'll probably end up with a class for kids, a class for adults, and we will see these people every week and see what new, fun, interesting things that we can do together.
Well, I wish you the best of luck in that, and I hope you'll keep me posted on what's going on in that world. Everybody
who's connected with me on Facebook will know more than they ever wanted to know about Make, I'm sure, in the next year.
Well, that's great.
So you wanted to tell us some things.
Yeah, so in 2 days, Sony will be announcing their PlayStation 4, which will be the next version of their home video console. And Microsoft is expected to announce their next Xbox at E3 in June. But I want to talk about the Sony product for a minute, because there's been a lot of rumors going around, and I figured we would talk about the rumors a little bit, how it and if these rumors are true, how it impacts customers in the video game space. And then, I figured maybe we could do a check-in next week and see if any of those rumors came true.
Absolutely.
There's been some public articles, big ones in the Wall Street Journal lately about the PlayStation 4, and one of the things that's been rumored is there's kind of 2 deal breakers for me as a gamer, that both the Xbox and the PlayStation 4 are rumored to be having. One of those rumors is the inability to play a used game. So, as we all know now, companies like GameStop.
Wait a second. I just lost you. Doesn't a game become used the first time you use it?
Right. So think about it this way. Like a CD key, right? You've used Steam before, right?
Yep.
You buy software on Steam. There's no way for me to transfer that license.
It's the ebook problem. Same issue.
Right? So they are purposely, the rumor is that Microsoft and Sony are purposely, you're going to buy a new game, you're going to put that game in the drive, the DVD drive, and it's gonna hard code that copy to that console. Or it'll hard code that copy to your account. And then it doesn't matter what console you're signed into, whatever. So basically this is going to do away with the used game industry because the disc that the game is on is going to be useless once it's registered to your account.
Wow.
And Sony has already experimented with that technology with PlayStation 3. There was one game called DC Universe Online where once you put the game in your console, it was registered to your account, and then that disc was no longer good anymore for anybody else. So they've developed the technology already to do it. So that's the rumor. The rumor is that this generation will not allow used games to exist. And I'm kind of skeptical on that because that would be a huge, like a huge slap in the face to the loyal customers of Sony and Microsoft. What I think is going to end up happening is that they're going to build in tools for developers to tap into if they want to utilize the ability to prevent used game sales. They'll have the ability, but then that'll be on the developer, the individual developer. So customers will be able to voice their opinions with their wallet. So if a developer is going to say, listen, this game can't be sold used, people are not going to buy that game. So I'm thinking that that's what's going to happen. I could be completely wrong. We could find out that it's going to need to require an always-on internet connection and all these horrible things, the draconian DRM things that existed in the PC space like 5 years ago. So that's the first rumor, and I hope that that's not true.
I'm sure that it is, because that is content producers' wet dream, is that they can have individual ownership of their products end with the death of that owner. As a matter of fact, who was the celebrity who, maybe it was Bruce Willis or somebody, who was making a big deal about their immense music collection on iTunes or wherever, and they were saying, after I die, I want to I want to pass on the legacy of the music that I love to my son and daughter.
You can't.
Or whoever. Huh?
You can't. Yeah, I read that article. It was Bruce Willis.
Yeah, and regardless of how you feel about Bruce Willis, who's not doing well right now because that movie is apparently horrible. It's a pretty valid point. We used to be able to hand off these objects, but this is 3D printing in reverse.
Right.
It's the opposite. Instead of more individual physical objects that take up space in the physical world, they're bits. Some things are moving in that way, and some things are moving in this way. It's in communication, digital communication. It's referred to as I can't think of the name of it, but it's a big concept in digital media communication. It just escapes me at the second. But it's this idea that the way that things were and the way that they are often passing each other, trying to get to the other side. And 3D printing, creating more physical objects out of the digital, is crossing over with the migration of physical books being converted to digital books.
Right.
It's like there's an exchange in value happening.
So that's the first rumor, and the second rumor is that there's been this kind of, Sony has been a champion So this is PlayStation 3 now, right? We're on the 3rd generation. 4th generation is coming out. Sony has championed backwards compatibility in all of their consoles. So when the PlayStation 2 came out, you could play all your PlayStation 1 games in the PlayStation 2. When the PlayStation 3 initially came out, you could play all your PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 1 games in your PlayStation 3. That's changed. So after about three years of the PlayStation 3 being on the market, Sony did away with that, as to save on production costs was the claim. Now the rumor is that both, and then Xbox has limited backwards compatibility functionality now with the original Xbox, and there's a legal reason why it's not full backwards compatibility, and I don't want to get into that argument, but there are I think about 125 titles or something that are backwards compatible. It's not the full Xbox library, but it's pretty close. All the major hits that you would have wanted to play were backwards compatible with the 360. So the rumor is that the PS4 and the next Xbox will not be backwards compatible at all in any way.
Maybe you just said this and I misunderstood, but PS3 did that with PS2 games at some point, right?
Yeah, there was a change. Like I said, it was on the market for about 2 or 3 years, and all the models had backwards compatibility with PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 1.
Yeah. When
they switched to the slimline PlayStation 3, they completely did away with backwards compatibility. This is the weird thing. There's backwards compatibility for PlayStation 1 in every PlayStation 3 that's been sold, even to this day. It's PlayStation 2 that became optional. And the reason for that is that Sony figured out that they could monetize digital copies of PlayStation 2 games through their store and sell those rather than give people the ability to buy used media on half.com or eBay for cheap and then play it on their PlayStation 3. So
it seems like the brand should be more important than the product. I mean, it should be. I wouldn't go out of my way to purchase a PlayStation 2 game unless there was some ease of that transaction,
right,
or I was getting it at some great value. If I have to pay full price or anywhere close to full price for it, I mean, I can understand if they want to make that money back themselves instead of it going to GameStop. And I even have a little bit of a problem with that. I mean, come on. But because there's value added in GameStop because they're right down the street or whoever,
sure.
You know.
Well, that's the thing is that and I don't want to just take a shit on Sony this whole segment here because Sony's actually done some things recently that have been, I think, empowering for gamers. They've leveraged some new technologies. I picked up a PlayStation Vita at Christmas time this year, which is the new Sony handheld that replaced the PSP. It's not doing very well sales-wise, but I got to tell you, it's got to be the best handheld gaming console I've ever owned. I love it. Absolutely, am totally in love with the hardware, the interface, and with this handheld, they instituted a policy called cross-buy, where developers now have the ability to enable their games as what they call cross-buy. So if I buy, for example, there's a pinball game called Pinball Arcade that's available on PlayStation 3 and on the PlayStation Vita. And it has old classic pinball titles in it that I love. I'm a huge pinball fanatic. And I love that this company exists and that they're making this game. It's awesome. If I purchase a pinball table, because they come out every couple weeks with new pinball tables, if I spend $4 on a new pinball table or $7 on a pack or something, and I buy it on my Vita, that gives me rights to use it on my PlayStation 3. Which is like, I know this may seem like obvious to you, like, oh, duh, this should be going on, but this has never happened before in the home console space. Like, that's amazing. So now I'm getting so much value now. Like, my $4 really is really, if you think about it, I'm paying $2 for a Vita copy and another $2 for a PS3 copy, or I'm buying $4 for Vita and I'm getting the PS3 for free. However you want to look at it. Whereas if I look at Microsoft, they just released a game for Windows 8, Xbox, and Windows Phone. Same game on all three platforms. If I want it on all three platforms, I got to pay a total of $30 combined for all three of them. Whereas on Sony, they're saying you purchase one copy, you're good to go. And it's not just like little hokey downloadable games either. There's like full-blown PlayStation 3, high-end graphic version. You buy, like Ratchet and Clank, which is like their version of Mario Brothers. You buy a copy of that for the PS3, they're giving you the Vita version for free.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think that's huge. And they've championed this, and now they have a new thing where Android phones, right?
Yeah.
Sony makes Android phones. They have a marketplace for Android phones, and they have mobile apps that are very cheap. We're talking $1.25 and under. If you buy it on your Android phone, you can use it on your PlayStation Vita.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, that's what I'm saying. They're building in this marketplace where gamers are only having to buy one copy at a super reasonable price, and it's working. It's ubiquitous, across all the devices. So,
this makes sense in other areas too, like Amazon with their. If you purchased an album, a physical CD album in the last 10 years or 15 years or whatever, they all of a sudden said, oh, and by the way, you can have the MP3s for those songs right now because you bought this 10 years ago.
Which is amazing. I love it. And I was so happy to hear that. And I went back into my account on Amazon, and I didn't even remember buying
This was the entire point. They wanted you to go back into your account on Amazon.
Right. And it was amazing. So, going back to the Sony thing, here's somebody who's, like I said, empowering gamers and giving a great value by saying, listen, we want you to use our mobile phones, we want you to use our portable gaming device, and we want you to use our home console device, and so we're going to give you as much value as possible when you reward us with a $40 or $50 purchase for any one of those platforms. We're going to make sure you can use it on the other three. Not to mention, too, I can use my PlayStation Vita, connect to my PS3 over the internet, and I can play software on my PS3 remotely, like in a VLC type of environment, which is like unbelievable. So it's hard for me to swallow the two rumors I discussed: no backwards compatibility and no used games, especially, like I said, when this company is single-handedly empowering gamers in a way that that has never been done before.
Unfortunately, I believe both of those rumors not only to be possible but likely.
Well, we'll know in less than 48 hours.
You remember Sony was the company who tried to install spyware when you put a music CD in your PC.
I do remember that. I unfortunately purchased my father Peter Gallagher, the actor's solo album of soul covers. And that was one of the CDs that unfortunately had the rootkit on it. So yeah, I'm aware of that. So I don't know. I feel like they learned their lesson from that, but maybe I'm wrong.
I thought maybe they learned their lesson from when they lost their Amazon S3 connection for that long time, or was it that they got their online network hacked?
Yeah, their username and password database was pilfered. I was one of those people, actually, unfortunately. But I have credit protection, which reminds me, I wanted to ask you before we started recording. I'll use this opportunity to ask you this quick question.
Yeah.
Do you have a mini disc player by any chance?
No.
Okay.
I used to.
You did have one?
I did, yeah.
Okay. I'll tell you offline why I'm asking.
Okay.
But I'm just trying to get a hold of one.
Right. I probably could lay hands on one. You know who could lay hands on one is Holland.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Guaranteed. Oh, didn't even think of that. All right, I'll hit him up then.
Got the JJ connection, so.
That's true. Well, we'll find out. Like I said, 2 days, PlayStation 4, big announcement, and we'll talk about it next week to see who's right. Let's see if John's pessimism or my optimism wins out. Maybe it'll be a mix of both. Who knows?
I really like this segment, by the way. I think we ought to work this in every week.
Pessimism, optimism?
So, not even necessarily, but predictions. I like predictions.
All right, let's do that.
All right, and it could be about anything. We can predict whatever. The next movie by Kevin Smith or whatever.
Okay. All right, John, thank you for another great episode. And do you have any closing thoughts that you want to say before we say goodbye?
Just that I really enjoy having this conversation with you every week, and it's enjoyable, it's educational, and I thank you for it.
Thank you, and I just want to leave our listeners with a closing thought. I had another amazing experience at the Microsoft store this weekend, so rather than waste showtime talking about it again, probably for the third time, I wrote it up on my blog, and I posted the link on our Facebook page. So let me drive some traffic to the Customer and the Service Facebook page, www.facebook.com, TC and TS, or just do the Customer and the Service in the search box, and you can get the link to that article. I had some custom decals done for my Surface, and it was.
Oh, I saw that. I didn't know that was what you were talking about. Yeah, that's killer.
Yeah, so it was a great experience. I hope everybody reads it and checks it out, and goes to a Microsoft store to get their decals.
Yeah, I still gotta get over there.
Yeah, you bring your Chromebook because you can get decals for your Chromebook.
Hey, I'm going.
$15.
Is it? We'll talk some other time.
All right. See you next week, John.
I'll see you next week.
All right, bye.